At its peak, this company was worth $32 billion, more than the Nasdaq exchange itself. Its founder testified before Congress, put his name on an NBA arena called crypto philanthropist billionaire. Blue chip investors like Sequoia Capital and SoftBank handed him over $1 billion. Then in about 9 days, all of it collapsed, and $8 billion in customer money was gone. So this is the story of the FTX crypto exchange. First, let's talk about the origin story. FTX was founded in 2019 by Sam Bankman-Fried, or SBF, and Gary Wang, a former Google engineer he'd known since a math summer camp as a teenager. But FTX wasn't SBF's first venture. 2 years earlier, in 2017, he'd already founded Alameda Research, a crypto trading firm, drawing on experience he'd picked up trading at Jane Street Capital on Wall Street. That order matters. Alameda came first, then FTX, and the relationship between the two would end up defining this entire story. FTX's earliest backing actually came from the inside the industry itself. Binance, already the world's largest crypto exchange, was an early investor in FTX back in 2019. In July 2021, SBF bought out Binance's entire stake for roughly $2 billion, paid partly in cash and partly in FTX's own token, FTT. That single transaction is worth remembering because it's what left Binance holding a massive pile of FTT, the exact asset at the center of FTX Collapse a little over a year later. Once SBF cashed Binance out, outside venture capital poured in fast. In July 2021, FTX raised $900 million from over 60 investors at an average $18 billion valuation. Names like SoftBank, Sequoia Capital, Paradigm, and Ribbit Capital. 3 months later, another $420 million came in at a $25 billion valuation from Temasek, which is Singapore's sovereign wealth fund, Tiger Global, and the Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan. Then, in January 2022, even as the broader crypto market was already starting to wobble, FTX closed a $400 million Series C round at a $32 billion valuation. In total, FTX raised over $1.8 billion from some of the most respected investors in venture capital. Sequoia Capital, in particular, went all in on the SBF narrative. The firm published a glowing, roughly 13,000-word profile of him on its own website, later deleted within a day of FTX collapse and replaced with a brief, somber statement. That profile becoming a punchline is one of the more telling artifacts of just how completely sophisticated professional investors bought into the story. By 2021 and 2022, FTX wasn't just a crypto exchange. It was a full-blown mainstream brand. SBF spent aggressively to buy legitimacy. A Super Bowl commercial in 2022 starring comedian Larry David, a $135 million naming rights deal that turns the Miami Heat's arena into FTX Arena, and endorsement deals with Tom Brady, Gisele Bündchen, Stephen Curry, Shaquille O'Neal, and Kevin O'Leary. FTX became one of the largest political donors in the United States, contributing an estimated $40 million across the 2022 election cycles. And SBF also testified before Congress on crypto regulation, positioning himself as the industry's cooperative, responsible face. Exactly the person regulators could supposedly work with. His personal image was built around effective altruism, the meaning of earning as much money as possible, specifically to give nearly all of it away to causes like pandemic preventions. Forbes and Fortune both ran cover stories on him. Fortune's cover asked whether he was the next Warren Buffett. At its peak, Forbes estimated his net worth at around $26 billion. Then in mid of 2022, as the broader crypto market crashed, Terra/Luna in May, Three Arrows Capital in June, Voyager and Celsius in July, while SBF's reputation actually got another boost. FTX and Alameda stepped in as a kind of lender of last resort, extending a credit line to the struggling lender BlockFi and moving to acquire Voyager's assets out of bankruptcy. Commentators started calling him the JP Morgan of the crypto, the one player stable enough to backstop a shaky industry. It was, in hindsight, close to the exact opposite of what was actually going on behind the scenes. But before we talk about how FTX downfall is, we first need to talk about the relationship between Alameda Research and FTX. Well, here's the structural problem that made everything else possible. FTX and Alameda Research were never really separated. On paper, FTX was the exchange and Alameda was just one trading firm among many that use it, a customer like anyone else. In reality, however, Alameda had privilege, back-end access that no other users had. Court filings and later reportings revealed Alameda was effectively exempt from FTX's normal risk control. It could run negative balances and avoid the automatic liquidation that would have hit any other account trading the same way. That's not a minor technical detail. It's the mechanism that let Alameda quietly borrow against FTX customer deposits without triggering the safeguards that were supposed to protect them. Layered on top of that, a significant part of Alameda's own balance sheet wasn't independent capital at all. It was FTT, the token FTX itself created and could effectively set the price off. So the backing behind SBF's trading firm was in large part an asset with no real external market validating its value. So when Alameda took losses through the 2022 bear market, that structure gave SBF a way to quietly plug the hole. FTX customer funds moved to Alameda to cover it. Prosecutors would later put the number at roughly $8 to $10 billion in customers' money that ended up funneled to Alameda over time. Money that was never supposed to leave FTX balance sheet in the first place. The public collapse started with just one report. On November 2nd, 2022, CoinDesk published a leaked Alameda balance sheet showing just how much of the firm's assets really were FTT. 4 days later, on November 6th, Binance CEO Changpeng Zhao, CZ, still sitting on the large FTT stake from cashing out his original FTX investment, tweeted that Binance would liquidate its FTT holdings, citing recent revelation that set off a bank run. FTX customers rushed to withdraw funds, FTT's price crashed, and it became clear FTX simply didn't have the asset on hand to cover it, because so much of it had already gone to Alameda and probably already lost to the bear market. By November 8th, FTX froze withdrawals. That same day, Binance and FTX announced a shock rescue deal, a non-binding agreement for Binance to acquire FTX outright. It lasted about 24 hours, and on November 9th, Binance walked away after reviewing FTX books, saying the problem were beyond our control or ability to help. Well, damn. On November 11, 2022, FTX, Alameda, and roughly 130 affiliated entities filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. SBF resigned as CEO that day, replaced by John J. Ray III, the restructuring veteran who had overseen Enron's liquidation. Ray's early filings become instantly infamous. He said that in his entire career, including Enron, he had never seen such a complete failure of corporate controls as he found at FTX. No real accounting department, custom software used to obscure fund movements, and minimal security over customers' assets. Beyond the core fraud, the controversies kept stacking up during the bankruptcy investigation. Customer funds were found to have gone towards roughly $300 million in Bahamas real estate for SBF and top executives, ventures investments made in Alameda and FTX name, and a lavish lifestyle that stood in sharp contrast to the give-it-all-away persona SBF had spent years building. At trial, prosecutors also highlighted attempts to influence witness testimony and manage the public narrative even after the collapse becomes public. Details that undercut SBF's own defense that this was mismanagement rather than a deliberate fraud. Sam Bankman-Fried was arrested in Bahamas in December 2022 and extradited to the United States. His own former inner circle turned on him at trial. Caroline Ellison, Alamida's CEO, and his former girlfriend, Gary Wang and Nishat Singh, had all pleaded guilty and cooperated with prosecutors, testifying in detail about how SBF directed the misuse of customer funds. On November 2nd, 2023, a jury convicted him on all 7 accounts of fraud and conspiracy. In March 2024, he was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison and ordered to forfeit $11 billion. He appealed, and in June 2026, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals upheld both the conviction and the sentence in full, calling the case against him robust. He's since applied for a presidential pardon, which the Trump administration has publicly signaled it won't grant. He remains in federal prison, not eligible for release until 2044. Caroline Ellison was sentenced to 2 years in September 2024 and released in January 2026 after about 14 months, along with a 10-year ban from serving as an officer or director at any public company or crypto exchange. Gary Wang and Nishat Singh, who also cooperate extensively, received far lighter outcomes as well. On the recovery side, because crypto markets rebounded significantly after 2022, and because the bankruptcy estate successfully clawed back a large amount of value, the FTX Recovery Trust had actually repaid most customer claims classes at or above 100% of their original claim, with some classes reaching around 119 to 120%. But those payouts are calculated using November 2022 prices, meaning customers are being made whole on paper while still missing out on the 3 to 4x appreciation the same crypto has been since. Distributions have continued in stages through 2025 and into 2026, totaling billions of dollars across multiple rounds. Venture investors weren't nearly as lucky. Sequoia wrote its roughly $214 million stake down to zero, and firms across the venture industry collectively lost most of the $1.8 billion they'd invested. So, what can we learn from this event? Well, affiliated entity conflict of interest are a red flag, not a footnote. The moment a trading firm and an exchange share the same founder and the same privilege, back-end access, separate companies stop meaning much in practice. That structure, not any single bad trade, is what actually made the fraud possible. Second, celebrity endorsement and blue-chip investors are not due diligence. Tom Brady, Sequoia Capital, and a Super Bowl ad all signaled legitimacy, and none of it meant FTX books were actually sound. If anything, FTX shows that sophisticated professional investors can be just as susceptible to a compelling founder story as retail buyers. Third, not your keys, not your coin applies just as much to a sleek, well-funded exchange as it does to a sketchy one. Size, funding, and reputation don't change what actually happens to your assets once they're sitting on somebody else's balance sheet. The fourth, transparency and independent audits matter more than a company's public image. FTX had virtually no real accounting department behind a genuinely convincing public fraud, a gap that only became visible once it was already too late for customers to act on it. So the next time you leave your money in an exchange, make sure you think hard at the risk that you are taking. If you like this content, please make sure to click like and subscribe to the channel, share this video to your friends and family. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.